In the shadowy corners of the dense northern woods lay Fisher's Lake, a dark and brooding expanse of water known for its eerie, glassy surface. The locals spoke of its beauty and danger in hushed tones, for they knew it was a place where the living and the dead were unnervingly close. One evening, a fisherman named Thomas Avery arrived at the lake with an old wooden rowboat and a tackle box full of lures. The sun was setting, casting long, sinister shadows over the water, and a chilling breeze stirred the treetops. Thomas, a seasoned angler with a thirst for solitude, was oblivious to the stories that shrouded Fisher's Lake in dread. As he launched his boat and drifted toward the lake's center, the air grew colder. The dying light of the sun bled into the lake, making the water look like a vast pool of liquid shadows. He cast his line with practiced precision and settled into the creaky wooden seat, the rhythmic lapping of the water, the only sound breaking the silence. Thomas had been fishing for hours when he felt a sudden tug. With a grunt, he reeled in a heavy catch. As the fish broke the surface, Thomas's eyes widened. It was unlike any fish he'd ever seen. Its scales were a sickly pale, and its eyes were as dark as the lake itself, filled with a malevolent glint. He tossed the fish back into the water, uneasy but not yet afraid. But as the night deepened, an unsettling sensation crawled up his spine. The temperature continued to drop, and the wind began to howl with a mournful cry. Thomas tried to shake off his growing unease and focused on fishing, but something was wrong. The boat was drifting farther from the shore. He tried to row back, but the oars felt strangely heavy, as if the lake itself resisted his efforts. The water began to ripple and churn, though there was no visible wind to account for it. Then he heard it, a low, mournful wail rising from the depths of the lake. Thomas looked over the side of the boat, and what he saw made his blood run cold. From the murky depths, ghostly figures began to materialize, pale, translucent forms that floated just beneath the surface. Their eyes were hollow pits of darkness, and their expressions were twisted in silent screams of despair. Panic set in. Thomas tried to row faster, but the boat seemed to be sinking, the water now lapping over its edges. The ghostly figures began to rise, their spectral forms becoming clearer. Thomas could make out their faces now, men who had been fishermen long before him, their bodies decomposed and their eyes filled with unending torment. Each face told a story of desperation and doom. One ghostly figure, more defined than the others, floated closer to Thomas. It was the face of a man with hollow eyes and a gaping mouth frozen in a silent scream. His hands reached out, and as they drew near, Thomas felt a chilling grip on his ankle. He looked down and saw ghostly hands emerging from the water, dragging themselves toward him. Thomas's heart pounded as he scrambled to get away. The water around the boat roiled violently, and the ghostly figures began to climb over the sides, their fingers dripping with the cold, dark water. They reached for him with a hunger that transcended death, their moans filling the night with a haunting dirge. Desperate, Thomas grabbed his tackle box and threw it into the water, hoping to distract the apparition. The box sank quickly, and for a moment the ghosts hesitated, their focus shifting. But their malevolence returned with renewed vigor. One ghostly figure, a gaunt man with hollow, accusing eyes, leaned close to Thomas and whispered in a voice like a cold breeze, "You have awakened us." The boat began to capsize as more of the ghostly figures emerged, their mournful wails blending into a cacophony of despair. Thomas felt himself being pulled into the cold embrace of the lake. He fought against the spirits, but their grasp was unyielding, their strength beyond anything he had ever encountered. In his final moments, Thomas realized that Fisher's Lake was not just a haunted place. It was a prison for the souls of lost fishermen, condemned to wander its depths for eternity. The lake itself seemed to hunger for more souls to join its ghostly legion. The next morning, when the local authorities found the empty boat, they discovered no sign of Thomas Avery. Only a lone, pale fish caught in the net, its eyes black and unblinking. The lake remained as dark and enigmatic as ever, and though the sun rose over the water, its light never truly reached the bottom. And so, the legend of Fisher's Lake grew darker. Those who ventured near its shores could hear the mournful wails on the wind and catch glimpses of ghostly figures rising from the depths, forever bound to the dark, haunted water. In the small town of Crestwood, nestled between rolling hills and dense forests, the most talked about place was not the charming antique shop or the historic library. It was Lake Ravenswood, a serene body of water shrouded in legend and whispers. Locals spoke of its unparalleled fishing, but they also spoke of something darker, something they only dared to mention in hushed tones. Nathan Rhodes was a young man with a passion for fishing. When he first heard about Lake Ravenswood from his grandfather, who had been a local fisherman himself, he was intrigued. The stories of big catches and the promise of an untouched, tranquil environment drew him in. But more than that, it was the allure of the mysterious past of the lake captivated him. The old tales spoke of a fisherman named Elijah Reed, who had been a local legend in his own right. Elijah was known for his unmatched skill and for a series of unprecedented catches that seemed almost magical. But one day, Elijah vanished without a trace. Some said he was taken by the lake itself, while others whispered that he had been claimed by something far more sinister. The lake, according to the stories, had a way of drawing people in and keeping them forever. Despite these ominous tales, Nathan was determined to experience Lake Ravenswood for himself. The weekend he chose for his visit was clear and crisp, with a gentle breeze rustling through the trees. The lake, nestled in a secluded corner of the forest, looked as inviting as any other picturesque fishing spot. Nathan arrived at the lake early in the morning, just as the sun was beginning to stretch its golden fingers across the water. The mist hovered above the lake's surface, giving it an ethereal quality. He set up his gear with practiced efficiency, his mind racing with anticipation. As he cast his line, he couldn't help but notice the lake's peculiar stillness. The water was so calm that it reflected the surrounding forest like a perfectly polished mirror. There were no birds singing, no rustling of leaves, just an eerie silence that seemed to deepen the further he ventured from the shore. Hours passed without a single nibble. Nathan's frustration grew, but he reminded himself that fishing required patience. He tried different lures and baits, but nothing seemed to stir the lake's depths. The silence weighed heavily on him, and he found himself glancing over his shoulder more often than he would have liked. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows over the water, Nathan decided to call it a day. He began to reel in his line, his thoughts already on the comforting warmth of his cabin. But just as he was about to pack up, he noticed something peculiar. The water near the center of the lake seemed to ripple, despite the absence of wind. Piqued, Nathan cast his line one more time, this time aiming for the center of the lake where the ripples had appeared. He felt a tug almost immediately, a strong, steady pull that was unlike anything he had experienced before. His heart raced as he began to reel in the catch. To his astonishment, as he drew the fish closer, he saw something far more unsettling. A large, shadowy figure beneath the water. It was almost as if the lake itself had taken on a tangible form. The figure seemed to move with purpose. Nathan felt a cold shiver run down his spine. Suddenly, the water erupted, and the figure vanished as quickly as it had appeared. The line went slack, and Nathan's catch was gone. He sat there, stunned, trying to process what he had just seen. The mist had thickened, and the air felt colder. He decided it was time to leave, but the sense of unease lingered. The next morning, Nathan returned to the lake with a mix of skepticism and excitement. He wanted to prove to himself that what he had seen was just a figment of his imagination. As he set up his gear, he noticed an old man sitting on a nearby bench, watching him intently. The old man had a weathered face and eyes that seemed to hold centuries of secret. Nathan, intrigued, approached him. "Good morning," Nathan said. "You come here often?" The old man nodded, his gaze never leaving Nathan. "I'm a regular," he said, his voice raspy. "Been fishing here longer than I care to remember." Nathan hesitated before asking, "Have you ever seen anything strange here? Anything unusual?" The old man's expression darkened. "This lake has a way of showing you things you might not be ready for. Some say it's haunted by the ghost of Elijah Reed." Nathan's curiosity was piqued. "Elijah Reed, the fisherman?" "That's right," the old man said. "He was the best there ever was, but he vanished one night. Some say he's still here, that he's still fishing, waiting for someone to join him." Nathan's mind raced with the memory of the shadowy figure he had seen. "Do you think he's still here?" The old man's eyes were filled with a knowing sadness. There are things that can't be explained, and there are things that shouldn't be. If you're going to fish here, be prepared for the unexpected. Despite the old man's warning, Nathan couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the lake than met the eye. That evening, he returned to the lake, determined to uncover the truth. As twilight descended and the first stars began to twinkle in the sky, he cast his line once more, focusing on the center of the lake where he had seen the mysterious figure. The night air was heavy, and the lake seemed to pulse with a life of its own. Nathan's thoughts were a jumble of apprehension and excitement. He felt the tug on his line, just as he had the previous evening. This time, he didn't hesitate. He fought with the unseen entity beneath the water, determined to catch whatever it was. The struggle was intense, and Nathan could feel the weight of the catch growing heavier with each pull. Finally, with a final heave, he brought the catch to the surface. What he saw was not a fish, but an old, rusted fishing reel, entwined with a tattered line. Before Nathan could react, the water surged violently, and a powerful force seemed to pull at his boat. He was thrown into the water, and as he struggled to swim, he saw a figure emerge from the depths, a translucent, ghostly form of a man with an anguished expression. The figure reached out towards Nathan, its eyes filled with a sorrowful, pleading look. In a panic, Nathan swam back to shore with all his strength. He could still feel the coldness of the water and the spectral presence that had tried to drag him under. Exhausted and shaken, he made his way back to the shore, his mind reeling from the encounter. Yes, the haunting legacy. The next morning, Nathan packed up his things and left Lake Ravenswood behind. He had seen enough to convince him that the lake was more than just a fishing spot. The ghostly figure of Elijah Reed was not just a legend, but a haunting reality. Back in Crestwood, Nathan shared his experience with the townsfolk, and the story of his encounter with the phantom fisherman quickly became a new chapter in the lake's lore. The old man he had met seemed to have vanished as well, leaving behind only his warnings and the chilling realization that some legends hold a kernel of truth. Nathan never returned to Lake Ravenswood. The memory of that night stayed with him. He had caught a glimpse of something beyond the veil of the ordinary, a reminder that some places are best left undisturbed, and some mysteries are better left unsolved. And so, the lake continued to lure those who sought its secrets, with the ghost of Elijah Reed waiting in the depth, forever bound to the water, forever waiting for the next soul to cast their line into the haunted waters of Lake Ravenswood.